Welcome back, folks. And real quick, before I start laying out my case for who I think is undoubtedly the most underrated rock and roll singer of all time, just the usual reminders. If you've been watching the videos and enjoying them, please like, subscribe, ring the little bell icon so that you'll be informed when videos come out. Share the video with someone who you think might enjoy them. That's a huge help. And of course, consider making a financial contribution. Buy me a coffee seems to be the most popular method. You can make a one-time payment or even do a recurring monthly payment. That would be incredible. PayPal seems to be the next most popular method after that. Look in the description of the video for those links. Also a reminder, if there's a certain song you'd like me to break down or a subject you'd like me to cover, go to mjerant.com, send me an email, and we can talk about it. We can negotiate a commission video for a very reasonable fee, and I will be happy to do it for you. All right, let's get into it. So good, just an amazing amount of talent crammed into such a small package there. Steve Marriott was apparently about 5 feet 4 inches tall. In that video, he looks like he probably weighed about 90 pounds soaking wet. But if you're a musician, you can't help but be a bit envious of this guy. He literally had it all from a very young age. He was involved in theater arts in London and appeared in the West End before he ever really became involved with rock and roll. As a young man, he was an often photographed sort of mod style icon. Then he fronted 2 iconic rock and roll bands, the Small Faces, and of course Humble Pie, along with a solo career after that. An incredible, powerful vocalist, hugely influential, a very competent guitar player, and a great showman who could work a crowd like few others. And yet I suspect many that consider themselves pretty serious rock fans barely even know who Marriott was. Maybe they've heard his name. When was the last time you saw Steve Marriott appear on one of those endless Rolling Stone or Spin magazine top 10 rock vocalists of all time polls? I don't think I've seen one. Now, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of the Small Faces, but I think it's very doubtful what that's worth considering how absurd and ridiculous that institution has become. Marriott's musical influences were overwhelmingly black jazz, blues, and R&B artists, everyone from Muddy Waters to Miles Davis, Ray Charles, Otis Redding, and the like. And this was readily apparent right out the gate on the first Small Faces single, What You Gonna Do About It, released way back in 1965, believe it or not. Check out this vocal.
I want you to come when you rock on you and let me walk you home at night. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? That's my question, baby. What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it?
But I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention Marriott's very first musical influence, and that was Buddy Holly. Apparently, he would go as far as wearing large-rimmed glasses with the lenses removed to look more like his hero. The very first song he ever wrote was called Sheila, My Dear, about an aunt who he was particularly fond of. Friends said it was very jaunty and much in the style of Buddy Holly. By the way, his friends actually nicknamed him Buddy at one point. By 1968, the Small Faces had morphed into a sort of psychedelic band, but I mean, who hadn't by that point? Their album of that year, Ogden's Nut Gone Flake, was a huge hit. And in spite of the stylistic change, the soulful voice is still there.
Love is all around me, everywhere. Love has come
By 1969, Marriott had left the Small Faces to form Humble Pie, which he felt would give him more artistic freedom. And of course, the Small Faces then became the Faces and hired Rod Stewart as the new frontman. And this is really typical of the Steve Marriott story. Rod Stewart was so obviously influenced by Marriott's gritty, bluesy vocal style. And of course, Rod Stewart is a great singer who deserves all the success he's attained, but it just somehow seems unjust that Rod Stewart has become a household name and a legend, and Steve Marriott has remained relatively obscure. Another absolute rock legend who was hugely influenced by Steve Marriott is Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant. He was a big fan in the early days, a regular at early Small Faces performances, and even served as kind of a gopher for the band, running small errands and whatnot. It was during this time that Plant heard Marriott sing a tune called You Need Love, written by Willie Dixon, most famously performed by Muddy Waters. And it was this that eventually inspired Zeppelin to come up with Whole Lotta Love, which is essentially You Need Love on steroids.
Oh, foolin', hey woman, you need coolin'. I'm gonna send you right back to schoolin'. Alright, leave them way down inside you.
Pretty crazy, right? As if we needed any more evidence that Robert Plant was a huge Steve Marriott fanboy. It's so fun to trace the lineage of this classic rock stuff. Once again, you had a tune penned by Willie Dixon, first made famous by Muddy Waters. Then Marriott and the Small Faces got a hold of it. Marriott replacing Muddy Waters' low baritone growl with his distinctive screeching high tenor. And then Zeppelin took over, Jimmy Page adding the iconic guitar riff, the guitar solo, the long sort of freak out section in the middle. It's really cool to see how this stuff develops over the years. And I think it speaks very highly of Marriott as a person that he supposedly harbored no animosity against Plant for the obvious nicking of his vocal style there. Apparently, when Marriott first heard Zeppelin's version of Whole Lotta Love on the radio, he shouted, "Go on, my son," and wished him luck. The Humble Pie era commenced in 1969 with the release of the group's first single, Natural Born Boogie, spelled B-U-G-I-E, a bluesy little number that made it all the way to number 4 on the UK chart. That's got a real Beatles Get Back vibe to it, doesn't it? And interestingly, this tune came out around 4 months after the Beatles had released Get Back. And, you know, that's probably why Marriott didn't get upset when Robert Plant copped his vocal style on Whole Lotta Love. All musicians steal from other musicians. That's just the way it is. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But I think my favorite Humble Pie track will always be 30 Days in the Hole from 1972's Smokin' album. This is just pure, raunchy, unadulterated rock and roll in the style of the Rolling Stones. And again, talking about the influence of this guy, listen to this and tell me you can't hear serious shades of Bad Company, who would appear on the scene about a year following this. Paul Rodgers, yet another revered singer who was hugely influenced by Steve Marriott.
Give me
love that tremolo effect on the guitar and the sound of the bass when it first comes in there. Just beautiful. Written by Marriott himself, this song is a sort of compendium of rock and roll excess. Take, for example, the second verse. Newcastle Brown, I'm telling you, it can sure smack you down. And let's just say he's not talking about brown ale here. Enough said on that. Take a greasy whore and a rollin' dance floor. It's got your head spinning round. If you live on the road, well, there's a new highway code. You take the urban noise with some Durban poison, it's going to lessen your load. And sadly, as is so often the case, those rock and roll excesses eventually became the downfall of Steve Marriott. Those close to him, including ex-wife Jenny Rylance, said he became a completely different person when he had to go on the road. She said he became another person to cope with the pressures. He would say things like, "Please tell me that you'll leave me if I go on tour again, because if you say that, I'll have justification not to go. If I go and have to be that other person again, I'll just go mad." It's really interesting. I think this was actually a fairly common phenomenon back in this period of rock and roll. I think Led Zeppelin's John Bonham was the classic example of this. When Led Zeppelin weren't touring, he was a family man tending to his farm in the English Midlands. But when the group went on the road, particularly in the States, he turned into this sort of beast. In fact, he earned that nickname at one point for his unhinged antics. All of that debauchery was really just a coping mechanism, I think. The pressures and temptations of being a very young guy in a top-tier touring rock band are no joke. Humble Pie disbanded in 1975 due to a combination of the usual suspects, the band members starting to hate each other, financial problems, substance abuse, and a general feeling within the group that the quality of the music had declined. And it was around this time that Marriott had a brief brush with the Rolling Stones. He auditioned for the group. This is one of those instances where I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall. The general consensus is that Marriott was Keith Richards' first choice to replace the departing Mick Taylor on guitar, but that Mick Jagger felt seriously threatened by Marriott's prodigious vocal abilities. Another of Marriott's ex-wives, Pam Stevens, claims Steve told her, "I was good and stood at the back for a while, but then Keith would hit this lick and I just couldn't keep my mouth shut." That sounds very believable. Marriott was talented and he knew it. He was always kind of a cocky little guy, it seems. She went on to say, Keith wanted him, but there was no way that once Steve opened his mouth, Mick would have him in the band. He knew Steve would never stay in the background. Probably true. And honestly, I don't think it would have been a good match anyway. Why would you take a guy who can sing like Steve Marriott and bury him in the Stones as a second guitarist backing up Mick Jagger? It just makes no sense. For that matter, the Stones apparently also considered Marriott's Humble Pie bandmate Peter Frampton as well. And that also didn't sound like a good match to me. I think Ron Wood was the obvious choice. His whole vibe is just so undeniably Stonesy. Marriott released his first solo album in 1976, simply titled Marriott. It's kind of a cool concept. It has a British side and an American side based on the musicians that are backing him on the respective sides. And this is also reflected in the album's cover in a clever way. You've got an image of Marriott in the middle, a British flag on the left, an American flag on the right. And while I think most would agree that Marriott's legacy will always be primarily tied to his work in the Small Faces and Humble Pie, his performance on this record and all of the various projects he engaged in for the remainder of his life show that his vocal skills never deserted him. don't want to dwell too much on Marriott's death, as it's really just another one of those sad rock and roll casualty stories. But in 1991, he had been in LA doing some work with Peter Frampton on a possible Humble Pie reunion, but he became disenchanted, caught a flight home with his third wife, Toni Polton, back to England, during which he drank heavily, fought a great deal with Polton. Upon arrival, Polton stayed with some friends while Marriott took a taxi back to his own house. At some point, he got in bed, lit up a cigarette, and promptly fell into a deep sleep, probably due to a combination of intoxication and exhaustion, and the rest is history. One of the firemen who arrived on the scene describes finding Marriott on the floor and feeling even more devastated than usual due to the fact that he had been a huge fan of Marriott throughout his life. As usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I know that a lot of people who watch this channel are older than I am and probably grew up listening to Steve Marriott and loving his music. And for those of you who maybe weren't so familiar, hopefully I've done my own tiny little part in keeping his legacy alive. Bottom line, if you're a fan of classic rock from the mid-60s onward, your favorite singer was probably influenced by Steve Marriott.